Hello there. What is going on, everyone? We are joined today by Atomic Mass Games superhero in charge, Will
Oh,
Shick. I don't know if that's actually your
as
title
I
this
mean,
week.
I'll take it.
Yeah. So
I'll take it. That's a pretty good title.
thank you. He didn't know I was going to say that, but yeah.
I
As
don't
a
even barely know how I got on this Star Destroyer bridge. Like I just turned on my computer and suddenly I'd been hijacked.
Absolutely. But Will, thank you so much for joining us today. We have a lot to talk about. I want to, for everybody watching at home, I want to talk about. We're going to talk about everything from Marvel to Star Wars. We're going to talk about AMG, and hopefully, hopefully we'll have time to cover as much as we can about as many games as we can. And I appreciate AMG letting you out of your office today to talk with me and talk about all the success you guys have had and maybe a little bit about the future as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
look, I'm excited to be here. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready
Okay.
to tackle everything. Let's go.
Awesome. So first off, you guys had a really interesting Adepticon with a lot of really cool announcements. How did you enjoy Adepticon this year?
Adepticon, I mean, it's always a blast. Like it's very exciting to see just how that show's grown. I'm really excited for the new space because one of the big bummers this year was that we had to, figure out how to basically get all of the players space to play the games because we had such an amazing turnout between all of the games. And so Armada kind of got moved to the ancillary space in the other hotel, and they had a great. I mean, I went over there. Several of us went over there a couple times over the weekend just to check things out and see
Yeah.
how it was going, and talk to some of the podcasters and the Iron Radio guys that were over there, and that was really fun. But it was a real bummer that we couldn't have everyone in the same space because it felt like we were missing a part of the family, the whole time we
Sure.
were there.
Sure.
So outside of, but that was really, to be fair, that was the only kind of downside of the entire weekend. Otherwise, it was
Was
it
the
was
downside
phenomenal.
having to talk to Armada, or that they had you?
No, 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 no.
I'm
Having
sorry. I'm
having to
sorry. That
take
was
a 15-minute shuttle was the
yeah.
down that they couldn't
No.
just be there with us because
Yeah, no,
there was
I
such great energy in
definitely.
that room.
It's for sure. Yeah, I think all of the communities. I mean, I'm a big Armada fan. It's
Hmm.
my favorite game. But I think all of these communities, because I'm tapped into all of them. Everybody's got so much energy and so much
Yeah,
enthusiasm. And the paint jobs. I mean, I think Adepticon is the place where they go on display. I mean,
yeah.
uh,
I
did,
mean,
what did you
a
see that really
huge
that wowed you this year?
huge hobby thing. There was I think there was some really cool Armada stuff. There was some pretty neat like custom X-wing stuff. Of course, the hobby miniatures games, they're specific where
Hmm.
you got to put paint on them and stuff, especially at Adepticon because it is a hobby specific show. So unlike a lot of shows at Adepticon, you can't play if your forces aren't completely painted, which is really fun because it means that you can see everybody like coming to bear with their own stuff and all of that,
Yes.
regardless of game line. And so yeah, it's just a blast. And of course, we do the worthy painting competition there, so we get to bring in a lot of Marvel stuff and see what people are working on for Crisis Protocol, and that's always fun to kind of get to work with those within that system and see all the great painters come in and do their thing. And so we're hoping to expand on that in the future because we've seen some really good response to it and get the other side of the aisle more involved and have them get an opportunity to show off all the cool stuff that they're using on the tables and things like
Oh
that.
yeah, you
um
guys had
but
some really amazing entries into the worthy. I
mhm,
saw like some Ultron stuff that was like,
yeah,
and they had just done so much to put these
yeah,
scenes together. I mean, I can't imagine how many hours goes into something like that. It's
a
incredible.
lot. Yeah, no, I mean those entries get worked on for some people over the course of an entire year, and so it's just a lot of artistry, a lot of passion, and it's really fun, to be able to inspire or at least have a place to celebrate that alongside the games. And of course, the gaming side it was crazy. We filled the entire hall, had to steal a quarter of the other hotel space for Armada,
Hmm.
and just like the huge X-wing turnout for Worlds. We had the biggest Legion turnout for Worlds. We had a really great showing for the first year of official like Adepticon play for Shatterpoint because we showed it off last year. This is the
Yes,
very
yeah.
first year that it's been around, and of course, just watching Crisis Protocol grow as well, along with these other games. Just a blast, right? Very exciting, and it's fun to get to hang out with the communities and try to interact with folks. And My favorite part about Adepticon this year was sitting at the prize wall. So whenever I had time, I would sneak over to the prize wall, and then as people like came over to give out tickets, you could kind of engage in natural conversation and see what people were excited about, what they wanted off the prize wall,
Oh
and
yeah.
just get some good feedback. Like it's always enjoyable for us to be able to get out there and hang out with people. And I think we appreciate it a lot more since we didn't get to do that for like 2 years, almost three.
Well, ever since like the
During the
pandemic put
pandemic,
such
yeah,
it's such put such a damper on these conventions, and
yeah,
I'm sure you're probably seeing a lot more like relief. And I think the
oh
first
yeah,
couple, like the first year back, there was probably a lot of apprehension. I think the first show I went to after 2020 was kind of scary. There was a lot of
yeah,
a lot of non-committal, and they weren't
yeah.
full. And it seems like this year it was like a capacity kind of event
And
or close
I
to
mean,
it.
even the first year back from Adepticon, because I think they had their first one in 2021.
Mhm.
We didn't go. No one. Asmodee was like, yeah, we're not quite feeling it for staff, so we're going to say no. But we supported Hank and the team as much as we possibly could to make sure the
Right.
events were good. So our first year back was 2022, and like that energy, that was really, I think, the return somewhat to normalcy. That was a wild Adepticon. You could tell that a lot of people had a lot of bottled up, like they'd been stuck at home for too long and they hadn't gotten to experience the stuff. So that one was, it was very much like it was like a rum springer in a way.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
People just came in and they were going crazy. But this year's Adepticon was awesome. It was really great to see everything. And so again, I'm so thrilled to see what next year brings and to see the new space. It's going to be twice the size that we had. So that's absolutely crazy
Yeah, so next year is
to
going to be
think
in
about.
Milwaukee. You guys
Hmm.
recently announced this. What kind of feedback are you guys getting with between the new Worlds announcement, the GTOs, the Grand Tournaments, the kind of the
Yeah.
changes to like no more store championships, but you're still going to have those store events, right? And
Yeah.
I'm
So
summarizing a lot of that, but yeah.
So kind of the idea, right, is that, and we talked about this a lot in the announcement for the GTs, was, one of the big things about the Road to Worlds and the way that the system worked when we took it over from Fantasy Flight, which they had changed from their previous work, right? And they
Right.
had kind of evolved it, was that you had these regional qualifiers, and then if you won a regional qualifier, you basically got a free ride, more or less, to go to Worlds when Worlds was held. Originally I think it was held in Roseville, and then they moved
Hmm.
it to Adepticon, or we
At
moved it
the
to Adepticon and
Game
moved to the Adepticon
Center, I
Rose.
think it was.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So, but effectively, that was kind of the idea. Now, of course, the what we kind of were seeing, right, was that it was a neat idea, and it worked well, but with the growth of the games across the globe and the fact that like that was a huge expense. It was a lot of the organized play budget and everything going into these very select individuals who were able to make it to a regionals, who
Hmm.
were able to qualify for regionals, and then were able to go and experience this amazing event at Adepticon and Worlds. And from day one, our goal has always been to make sure that all players have as equal access as we possibly can to these really cool events, right? Like, we've seen the data that having play experiences that cross the gamut, not just competitive play, but casual play and narrative play and hobby experiences and all this stuff. If you have all those things working together in a healthy ecosystem, you see the player communities grow, you see them thrive, you see more players come into the system, which is great for everyone because it means we're going to be able to make more cool stuff, and we're going to have more
Hmm.
players to play cool games with, and we're going to get to do all this stuff, right? It all builds off of each other.
And I think you need
So
both sides. You need the
yeah,
I did a video on this recently where I was talking about casual versus competitive, and I think like casual play is great because that's probably maybe 75% or even more of your customers are the kitchen table players and the people who don't necessarily go to the worlds and the big tournaments, but
mm,
you need that competitive scene to kind of balance the game and to keep you on your toes and to keep those rules, like those exploits or those things, like to bring those things to light that maybe need
yeah,
rebalancing or addressing.
a little bit, right? I mean, competitive players are folks who are focused on the min maxing or the super efficiencies. They may find the broken quote unquote stuff,
Hmm. Oh,
or
they will.
the
I don't
imbalanced
think there's
stuff
a may about it. I think they're definitely
as
going to find
fast.
it.
Like they may find it first, but
Hmm.
to be honest, a lot of the things that you're really concerned about from a game development side
Hmm.
are not those things. They're things that casual players find, right? We always talk about people like, do you balance for competitive play? It's like,
Hmm.
no, we don't. We balance for great play, right?
Hmm.
Because a competitive player will put in the energy to figure out the answer. If they can't find the solution, they will dig into the rules and they will go through all the permutations until they say, I believe this is what was intended, or this is what the rules language tells me it is, even if I don't think that's the intent. We can see from, all of this language that they use, all this technical data, this is the answer. Your average player won't do that, right? So if you don't balance a game well, if you don't make sure that the rule set is tight and the character balance feels good and unit balance feels good, right? If you don't give them all the answers and you make them work for it, you're not going to have a very popular game.
Sure.
So all of your focus goes towards making a great base game experience. And then from that, you're going to get a certain set of players that like what they really want to do is see their skills grow and evolve, and they want to be able to test themselves against other players and see if they're, if they're like working their way to the top, right? It's a progression of skill, the same that you see in painters who come into the Worthy, right? And our painting competitions. They're hobbyists who started and they just wanted to paint some miniatures, and then they got really enmeshed in it and they're like, can I get better at this? Can I climb the mountaintop?
I don't think too many of your worthy, at least your high, the ones that we've seen showcased are people who just started this. This is obviously the result of probably years of honing the craft.
And I mean, and they're not people who just fell into it, right? Like there's an intentional choice of I really enjoy this, but what I really enjoy is challenging myself. I want to push myself, right?
And these games do both too, because I didn't get into tabletop gaming in order to become a hobbyist. I got in. X-Wing actually got me in, and I didn't even know the first thing about painting. And then I eventually started to kind of dip my feet in the water and has some really really rough paint jobs and on some X-Wings, but that brought me into what was the Imperial Assault, and then eventually Legion, and then MCP and Shatterpoint, and all of the and 40K and like all these other games too. I mean, sorry, I don't. This game, there are games outside
they all
of
exist.
AMG too.
I mean,
they're all there.
You don't have to pretend like there's nothing else in the environment. Like I know, we all play lots of things. You'd be surprised. It's not a dirty secret. So
exactly,
you can't offend me by saying something that everyone knows is a thing.
That's true.
Real.
Yeah. No, so these games are just there. It's great the way that like the gameplay and the hobby kind of mix, and especially when they have a really good balance and that good blend where you can show off a painted army. Like to me, there's a huge satisfaction in that, and that applies to both. Like the hobby miniatures games as well as the pre-painted games too, because I love to repaint X-Wing and Armada ships too. It's like it's super fun, but I know you guys see so much of that with the Worthy.
And even if you don't want to paint, right, just seeing all of that stuff on the tabletop presented well, like one of the great things about X-Wing Armada, right, is the fact that you don't have to challenge yourself with a brush if you don't want to, and it looks just as cool as the Legion or the MCP tables or whatever that's going on.
For sure.
But anyway, so like to get back to your original question, right, like. We know that having this balanced ecosystem where players can engage in things is really great. The problem is that because of the expense of the regional system and the way Roads to Worlds worked, most of our budget was going into very few events, right? I think we had 12 of them around the globe. It's not a lot, especially when you consider how much the games have grown. And also places that are like younger communities or new communities or just smaller regions. If you don't have, the means, the methods, like the ability to travel to one of these few regional competitions, of which, most of them were in the US or in North America, and there were a few in Europe, and there was like one in Australia, you wouldn't get the opportunity to. And so, through our kind of looking and discussions, we were like, we really need to open this up. And the way in which we can do that is by effectively creating a system that is more egalitarian in how it applies the rules, right? So for regionals, there were so many requirements, there were so many restrictions, because we had to make sure that all these things were being followed, because the expense was really high. And we only have so much budget, right? At the end of the day, we only have a certain amount of dollars that we can spend on promoting the games through this system and everything else we do. So we want to make sure that we're maximizing that value for both, the game's success, but also for the players.
Yeah. And I think as far as the players, like their local tournaments too, like they're still getting that same experience, whether or not it's you getting a Worlds invite, or you're still getting cool promos, you're still having great competition, you're still seeing, local play at your local store. So I feel like you're still hitting, you're firing on pretty much all cylinders with the same kind of promotion, and so reaching more people possibly.
Yeah, and I mean, well, so the idea, right, is that you have that local play, right? We have the tournament kits, so there's absolutely supported store play where you can come in like once a month or every week, depending on how active your community is, and play in a Swiss event and work within your community, right? But I think one of the things that really ignites a fire under people regardless of where they fit into the ecosystem, are things like Adepticon, right?
Mm,
Bigger events where you're coming together,
yeah.
not just from within your store community or your local meta, and you're seeing this like regional or even national, or continental meta.
Mm,
And that's when you go, oh, I'm part of something bigger. And we see this a lot, right? We saw a lot of people in the initial response be like, well, what I love most about coming to Adepticon is seeing all these people that I'm friends with, but they're friends I see once a year, or they're friends that I see only when I come to these specific events. And we get to hang out and we share this common language of the games, and we get to chill. And then we do our thing, we split apart, we go back home, and then we know we're going to come back like regular, right? Bringing that to more people brings more of the game's ecosystem. And it also like broadens the ability for people to see different levels of competition throughout. It kind of enhances the player journey. It also provides really foundational support, right? You talk about, if you're going to go to a convention, most people go to a convention like an Adepticon to play in the competitive events. That's, you're going to go there to do something like that, or that's going to be one of your anchors. You might go play in like team events and league events and all these other crazy things, right? You're going to experience some side events, but you need like that main hook to get you there. So by providing the grand tournament format, the goal is that we open up high level competitive play that's a regional basis, right? It's a wider net than the local. It's not necessarily meant for stores.
mhm.
Stores can potentially qualify for it if they can bring in a wider group, right? Like some stores are linchpins for
There are
entire
some big,
regions,
yeah.
especially in the United States,
There's
right, where we
definitely
have so
quite a
much
few,
space.
right? And so that's what I
If
mean. Like, I feel like you're more likely to have access to one of these.
Yeah, and that's the goal, right?
Maybe
It's all about
driving or maybe a
access.
short flight, depending on
Mhm.
where you're at, as opposed
And
to having to go to Worlds and you know,
yeah,
which leads
and
me
the
to
other
another
thing
question. But
too.
go ahead.
No, and the other thing too, right, is that it also allows us to be more flexible on like what constitutes a large regional event, right?
Right.
If you're talking about a place like the Nordics, where there's just not a lot of population in general, and there's a smaller player population, they can now have a big, grand tournament for their area that is okay based on their player density and their player population.
Mm,
So a place that maybe has a new starting community, or some place that has a smaller just overall general population that would have never been able to qualify for one of these regional events before because they had to be so big, they had to have such a wide breadth and reach. They can now get that, and they can kind of take pride in the fact that I think every country wants its own big event, right? So this means that every country potentially gets to have its own grand tournament, provided that they have somebody who's willing to run it and can fill the qualifications and make sure that the event goes great.
right.
So that was part of it. And then the other part of it was, and this kind of came into the effect of like I know some people were a little confused on the messaging, but we always knew that we wanted to still have a Worlds event, right? To have a big AMG organized, like this is the place. If you want to, you can go to your regionals and you can have a lot of fun with that. And I think certain regional or grand tournaments, right? You can go to the grand tournaments in your regions.
Yeah,
And
that
some
was my
grand
next
tournaments
question too.
will
Is that
kind of like balloon out, right?
right?
Into if they have, if they have a real, like, I kind of imagine that the UK is their grand tournament for X-Wing, because they have such a strong X-Wing community, is going to become one of the grand tournaments that if you want to prove your medal, you go win that one, right? You go to that one. That's where the highest level of competition is going to be found many of the times, just based on, regional likes and player dispersions and all this stuff.
Mm.
We still wanted to have the Worlds, but we had this interesting issue where like you don't want to announce something unless you know you can do it.
And that's where my question is. Yeah, exactly. Why the delay? Right? Was it reactionary or yeah?
The Adepticon was still very much like they were still in conversation for the space.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So we knew that there were going to be changes, because we knew from our talks with Adepticon and being great partners that they are, that they were going to go through a transition. The problem is that we didn't know what that was going to look like. So the last thing we wanted to do was come out and say, we're going to do this thing and this is how it's going to work, and then realize that it wasn't going to work that way.
Okay.
Right. But the flip side to that, because life is not fair, is that we had to get the grand tournament announcement out because the timeline, the cutoff for grand tournaments was rapidly approaching. And we had a number of events that typically had run regionals in the past, or who had talked to us about running regionals in the future, that their event deadlines were coming or past, right? There were people who are just like, well, we need to say something. And we're like, well, we can't, at some point we have to inform them of what's happening. We have to, because like no one runs on our schedule, and that's just how the world works.
Mhm.
It's, your Nova Open, it happens when it happens, and it needs to post its announcement date at X time, or this French tournament that wants to run a regionals in the past,
Right.
which happens in May. Okay, well, you're announcing that before Adepticon, so we were kind of playing this line of how do we make sure that everyone has what they need, and so it became this kind of split rollout where it was like we have to announce grand tournaments, we have to let people know what's going on, we know we're doing that no matter what.
Mhm.
But can't really we couldn't really effectively announce the open worlds idea until we had confirmation and an understanding with Adepticon that, hey, we want to do this. Can you, can we? Are you okay with it?
Mhm.
Can you support this? Like, what does our space look like? How is this going to affect everything else? Because at the end of the day, I think one thing that people may not be aware of is that we organize and support heavily by being personally invested in partnership with Adepticon those events, but they're still Adepticon's events, right? Like
Mhm. Right. It's
Adepticon
not
is
your
still
convention, it's
controlling
their
it. It's not
convention.
our show.
Yeah.
So like you're not going to bust into somebody else's house and be like, this living room's mine, move the furniture like this because I say
Sure.
so.
Now, if you guys ever do have your own show, then that would be a whole different ball game. That
It,
could be
it
that could
would
be
be,
pretty fun
right?
too.
Like we could effectively make all of the decisions
Mhm.
that we wanted to and suffer all the consequences. But because Adepticon, is, I mean, we love working with them. We love that show.
Yeah.
We want to be great partners, just like they've been great partners to us. So at the end of the day, right, we have to make sure that they're copacetic with what we're doing and that we're not stepping on their toes. We don't want to put them in a position where it's like, okay, well, you said you were going to do this, but we didn't plan on it, or we don't have what you need to do it. So now we have to take from somebody else, or we're putting them in a bad position.
Sure.
That's just how it worked out. And, it was like,
So
I think
between
it was a
Worlds
little
and
bit
the
of pain.
GTOs, it sounds like there's a lot of moving parts, and to get
There's,
everything to sync up, it sounds like it can be pretty challenging, and a lot of people
well,
aren't seeing
yeah, and I
that.
mean, and at the end of the day, right? It's like anytime you're kind of changing a whole system and you have a bunch of different partners, and this doesn't even count, the internal stuff with the licensors and everything else, right? Like we have a lot of steps and checks that we have to go through to get communications out, to make sure that things flow. And it's on us to make sure that we manage it as best as possible. Sometimes it works perfectly, and sometimes there's little hiccups. In this case, the announcements that were supposed to come out together,
Mhm.
they got split apart a little bit because we had to make sure that we were crossing all of our T's and dotting all of our I's.
One other final question, because we're talking a lot about organized play, and I want to move on to game
Mhm.
specific stuff in a minute. We also touched a little bit on some of the the local tournament kits.
Mhm.
There hasn't been, or maybe if it has, I haven't seen it as much, but I've only seen like a little snippets of that. Is that an announcement that's going to have more stuff coming, or can you talk about like which games are getting those yet, or is that like to be
So
determined?
yeah, so we're going through a bit of again, right? This is kind of a longer term rollout and transition in terms of organized play and how we're covering stuff.
Mhm.
So certain games this year, I think Legion is the first. It has a store tournament kit, which kind of like builds off of the back of what we saw last year. Although the
Right.
difference being that it doesn't give you a Worlds invite anymore because
Mhm.
everyone's invited to Worlds now. You're all welcome.
Yeah, everybody. Yeah,
You've all
everybody
won
gets a
an
world's
invite.
invite.
You show up
Yeah.
and come party with us.
Mhm.
So that one does. There of course are still event kits for Shatterpoint and for Crisis Protocol, and then Armada and X-Wing also have like the store tournament packets. So all of those things will be seeing new refreshes on that stuff
Okay.
to a greater or lesser extent, right? As we move forward and as more announcements come out. So the big thing is that we're a little bit in a rollout that's going to occur over the course of the next year.
So if it doesn't all
Uh,
happen at once, people don't need to panic.
no, 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 no.
Okay.
It's again, it's one of those things where like, we're basically we're building the foundations and then we're moving forward with
Sure.
stuff. And we're
Okay.
trusting on the fact that we have these things that are built, right? There are tournament store packets for X-Wing and Armada and Crisis Protocol and all these things. And so, in order to do that stuff properly, we're kind of just going in the order that we're going. We're making those announcements, and we're also changing a bit of how we're interacting with retailers as well, which the players will see as we move forward. But what we're really trying to do is make sure that we're reconnecting with the local retailers and the gaming stores to make sure that they feel supported and that they're the centers of their communities at the local level.
Yeah, and that's really
Um,
important to have local people to play against. I mean, I've seen
yeah.
so many people, on different social media or in discords and stuff talk about like, oh, I would love to play this game, but I don't know anybody who's playing.
Yeah.
it can be work to try to like start
Yeah.
up a community, and these things, I think these initiatives really they go a long way.
And so that's another thing that's happening, right? In the past, all of the organized play support has been basically the store has to purchase the kit,
Mhm.
right? And so there's a bit of an onus on the retailer to be like, okay, I'm gonna pick up this kit, I'm gonna order it from the distributor, I'm gonna bring it in, and then I'm gonna find somebody to run it, and I'm gonna organize it and run it,
Mhm.
which is a fine system. But one of the big steps that we wanted to take, and part of what our evolving like progress is, in order to really dial in on the fact that we want the stores to be the center of the communities, and we want to connect with them better and give them better tools for support, is that we're breaking our organized play systems out into where there will be free promotional kits for stores that they can choose to run tournaments with, or to run events with, or to run demo nights with, in
That's
addition
awesome.
to the standard kind of tournament support that we've seen before, the organized play kits that we've seen before, where a retailer can bring those in and they have fancier or more awards, or they're kind of bent to a specific thing.
So you guys watching at home, tell your stores to
Yeah.
get in on this stuff. There's no
Yeah.
excuse anymore.
So I mean, effectively, right? Those programs will start rolling out over the course of the year. I think the first one is starting across a couple of select regions. The US is one. I think the UK is another. I'm not sure which other regions for Asmodee are doing it, but with the release of the Crew of the Ghost packs for Shatterpoint,
I'm excited about that one.
I think we've shown off those wanted posters that Ryan Ritter made a couple of times.
I see. Sorry,
So
I'm gonna save that. I'm gonna save my hype until we start talking about Shatterpoint, because.
So anyway, so those posters are actually alternate art promo cards for the order deck.
Nice.
And those are being provided to retailers through their distribution units based on the distributor's specific program for them.
That's really cool.
For free for stores to use. And we expect, we're suggesting that stores run some kind of Shatterpoint style tournament or event or things like that to use them, but they can do whatever they want with them.
And I've been seeing other Asmodee, like Fantasy Flights had a lot of success with Star Wars Unlimited, and they've been doing very similar promotions. I'm starting to see, I don't know if it's just a Star Wars thing, or I mean, it might be being under the Asmodee umbrella, but I'm seeing
I think a lot of it's come from just discussions internally, and we're seeing similar trends, and I think everyone's just kind of like getting on the same board, and we're all every studio is kind of doing it in their own specific way that works for their products.
People love promos.
But at the end of the day, right?
They're fun.
It's all about for us, our success lies at the local community level. It lies at that store level. So how do we build them up and give them the resources they need? And the downside to that is that all change takes time. All these transitions have multiple steps to them. It's not something that we can like snap on a dime, because at the end of the day, if we want to do that, right, if we want to do everything all at once, there's like a 2-year gap. We always talk about our production timelines and everything. And so you can, how long are you willing to stick with a system that's either not functioning well or is beginning to show a lot of age before you're like, all right, are we gonna renovate as we go, or are we gonna let things sit and hope that it doesn't get so bad that by the time we can like do it all at once, it's going to be fine, right? So, and those are some choices that we make as well.
So you say it takes time, and I'm going to use that as my segue, because time has been pretty interesting. Speaking of time, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Marvel Crisis Protocol is hitting 5 years this year. Since release. That's huge. What's it like watching this game, the game that launched Atomic Mass Games, grow after all of these years?
It's pretty wild, right? I mean, it's very rewarding. It's pretty humbling. I'm just excited that we were able to, create something that people really enjoy and they found love in, and that seems to represent the Marvel universe in a way that most people think is very accurate, 99% of the time.
Yeah, definitely.
And so it's been a wild ride as a lifelong Marvel fan myself.
Sure.
Right?
This is a good time to be a Marvel fan too. I've got to ask you.
Not too bad.
Have you been watching X-Men '97 at all?
Oh yeah.
Oh dude, I mean, I know
it became my wake up ritual actually on Wednesdays. I'd wake up and the first thing I'd do is turn it on just so I didn't have to worry about spoilers at work.
This past Wednesday was kind of sad not having a new one, and I'm just like, okay, well now we just got to speculate.
It was a desert. We didn't have 97. We didn't have Bad Batch. We didn't have anything. It was what are we doing with our lives? I gotta
find something new to watch. I'm like, I guess I want to finally watch Breaking Bad after all these years. But we're getting it, getting around to the bucket list of things. But you guys announced a lot of new stuff for Marvel Crisis Protocol at Adepticon. One thing that I want to talk about, and it kind of has a tie-in, although I'm not going to get too spoilery with X-Men '97 if you guys aren't watching. you definitely should watch. I mean, you will not regret it. But you guys announced Apocalypse, and so how? First off, I mean that's huge. That's a big deal. How big is this guy? How big is this guy going to be? Because I know he can get really big.
Yeah, I think the miniature that we did is he's larger than Thanos.
Okay.
So he's like Hulk. I think he's about the Hulk height, maybe
Okay.
a little taller. He's not Dormammu size. We didn't go crazy with it.
Okay.
Even though he's like biomorphic. So yeah, he can be whatever he wants to be because he can change his height and mass and all that stuff. So we want him to be imposing, but we didn't want him to be like ludicrous. Because in most of the comics and most of the time he appears, he's a giant, but he's not like a giant.
You want people to be able to actually store him on the shelf or
yeah,
somewhere too.
Yeah. Well, and we always go with that feels right. You know,
Right.
like when you think about Apocalypse, how do you naturally like think he appears most of the time?
Yeah.
And it's not skyscraper size. It's not giant man size. It's just big.
So
it's Hulk size.
I have a question, and it kind of goes back to conventions, but it also ties into MCP. Are we going to see a special like thematic play event at Adepticon where Apocalypse does really, really grow, and you've got like maybe 8 or 10 people trying to take him down, but it's actually Dallas Kemp in an Apocalypse costume with like the drill arm, like just knocking people off the table. Like I think this is an idea. I think it's a moneymaker.
I mean, I think once Dallas Kemp listens to this interview, we're probably going to have to do something like that.
We've got to. I want to see him in an Apocalypse costume.
Yeah,
I think
you've said all the right things. He's got the bald head for it and everything.
Oh my God,
he's ready. He's ready.
I think he's ready. I think he would love it. But like that would be a really cool convention experience that you can't just replicate at home too. Like come trying to defeat Kemp Apocalypse.
Take down the massive Kemp Kaiju. Yes. No promises on that, but like I said, I think once Dallas gets that gleam in his eye when he realizes that this could happen,
absolutely,
I'm going to hear about it a lot. So I thank you for that.
No, good. I'm looking forward to it. No, it's a super fun game. I feel like you guys may have. I don't know if it was accidental or if you just struck gold, but like when you look at like the X-Men and the designs you guys did, a lot of this was like the Jim Lee style. I'm a big X-Men fan. I like the MCU and I love Marvel Crisis Protocol. It's one of those games I love to play. I never have a bad game, but I feel like with the costume design, were you a little clairvoyant? Did you have any heads ups from Marvel? Hey, we're going to do this amazing show in a few years, so when you're designing the X-Men, do them in the classic style because it's going to be gold.
I wish I could say we were that smart. I think part of it was literally just fan bias. Most of us grew up with X-Men 92, the original animated series, and the Jim Lee and the Chris Claremont stuff. Yeah. So for us, it was like that when we think about X-Men internally, that's the era of X-Men that we really think about. But we did do a gut check on that because we had a lot of conversations about, should we do because at the time, I think we were seeing designs for Dawn of X and Powers of X and House of X and all that stuff. And they had kind of changed. And the X-Men always get slightly different costumes. But talking about it internally, it was just like, okay, well, what do you see on all of the consumer goods, right? Like, what do they put on kids' underwear? What do they put on bed sheets?
Recognizability is an important thing.
The reality is that the most recognizable version of the X-Men, because it was at the height of the X-Men's popularity, so it just gets used a lot, was the Chris Claremont, Jim Lee stuff. Yeah. And so that kind of said, okay, our internal bias does match the external, facts of what Marvel is doing and how they keep going back to these characters. And even even kind of the evolutions of their looks, they still have so much of that Jim Lee look to them. Yeah. And that 90s era,
they really
they'll do little tweaks, but so that we kind of just lucked into it a little bit. But I think, anyone who thought about it with a little bit of like intensity would be like, no, this is how the universe sees the X-Men, right?
That's how I saw it. So when I saw that you guys announced X-Men years ago when they first started, I was over the moon. I was like, these are my X-Men. Like, this is the way I want them to look. This is perfect. Yeah. Like, and I'm also a Doctor Who fan, and it's like a similar thing. Everybody's got their favorite Doctor. This is my Doctor. And for me, these were my X-Men. So the only one, Storm, was a little different than I think from the cartoon. So I'm like, if I ever do a different Storm. Although she's got so many looks. So
we went for that black. We went instead of the white 92 costume, we went for the black costume because when we talked about that a bit, we felt like the black costume really, it spanned the bridge of the different versions of X-Men better than the white one is very specific,
It was very
right? Like,
recognizable, and I was still able to kind of paint that one more
yeah,
whitish,
yeah,
and so
yeah.
it's still crosses.
Yeah, but like
Hmm.
if you look at kind of like Storm's costume evolution over the entire course of her run in the X-Men,
Hmm.
the black costume, typically she's wearing something with black.
Hmm.
And so it felt like we did make a little choice on that one. We're like, I think this one just will be a more universal
Yeah,
any era Storm. Because we always talk about how we look at these characters and we want to design the characters as a point in time. We're
yeah,
we're looking at specific story runs or things like that. Because our goal is someday to come back to these characters and do them in a different era or to do
right.
them in a different place in their storyline. We can't always be assured 100% that we'll get the chance to do that or the opportunity that we hope we will. But we do kind of try to like bake in. Okay, if this is the only version of the character we ever do, does it kind of touch everyone's general aspects of what this character is and what they look like, especially with
Hmm.
the miniature? And so we went with black costume instead of white costume, and
No, it
I think
wasn't.
it
It
was
wasn't
pretty
a.
successful.
It
But
was a. It was.
people
It's a great model, and the sculpt is
people
really good, and you
noticed.
capture a lot of the essence of the character there. I
Mhm.
think, like when you're watching something like X-Men, are you consuming media? Are you like taking notes the whole time? Is it hard to differentiate between being a fan and I know I do this when I'm watching Star Wars
Mhm.
stuff. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Wait, should I talk about that? Could that be another ship that shows up in a game? Oh, hold on. Let me pause. Let me get screenshots. Like it's. Do you feel the same
Yeah,
kind of pressure sometimes?
I mean, I think everything, a lot of the times, when you're watching something or you're seeing the new show and
Mhm.
something comes up and you're like, that's so awesome, we should do that someday.
Speaking of Storm, I
Or
think like her portrayal in X-Men '97
yeah.
really gives some room for like a more powerful level of
Hmm.
Storm. And I'm like, whenever
Yeah.
that comes around, I'm gonna be here for it.
Yeah, like and so there's that interesting piece where sometimes you see something, you're like, oh, we nailed it, like we got it
Hmm.
right.
Yeah,
X-Men 97 comes out, it's really popular. We dove in on the Jim Lee era, Chris
yeah.
Claremont, like 90s X-Men.
Mhm.
Like couldn't be better, couldn't be more perfect. Kind of lucked into it.
It gave me the
Um,
opportunity to get caught up on my backlog. I'm proud to
yeah,
say, as of like last night, all of my Marvel Crisis Protocol is fully painted. I still have to
nice.
seal them, but they're painted. Yeah. So
And then there are other times, where things come out and you see them and you're like, oh, people are going to be asking for that,
hmm.
and you can just kind of like, so it is
Yeah.
different. Like I can appreciate it as a fan, but in my brain, I'm always kind of analyzing it from the game perspective, and
Hmm.
how is the community going to react, and what things hit and what things don't, and did we make right choices and did we miss something? Because we're working 2 years ahead. We're working
Sure.
farther ahead 90% of the time. We're farther ahead than they even are on the media production side.
So
That's
speaking
our
of being
timeline's
far
just
ahead,
longer.
how many more Black Panther variants do you guys have in the lineup right now?
I
Sorry.
told everyone at Adepticon they wouldn't see another Black Panther for at least 2 years, and I will
Okay.
hold to
Okay.
that.
No, that's great. Have you guys announced? And this is I don't even know because I've fallen behind a little bit. Is there a Jubilee yet, or have you guys announced Jubilee
We've not announced a
Okay.
Jubilee.
Oh,
I think
okay.
she's the last one missing from the T-shirt that I was wearing when
Mm.
we announced X-Men in the first place.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
So hey, keep your eyes peeled. Maybe
I know
maybe
I've
that'll
been I've
happen
been
someday. Who
checking
knows?
I've been checking faces off that shirt for a while now. So we got one more to go, I
It's
think.
very cool. I love just putting together like the classic
Mhm.
teenage years and just having the whole team. And it becomes
Yeah.
hard to like pick like who do I want in this do I want Colossus to throw Wolverine? No, no, I already
Mhm.
have. I want Juggernaut instead because I just finished painting him. I wasn't even going to
Yeah.
use Juggernaut, but the paint job came out good, so now I've got to use it. Anyways,
Yep.
that's just a challenge. You guys, you're killing me with this stuff. There's so many really good sculpts. You're killing me. All right.
Yeah, we have an incredible engineering team, and they
You guys
continue
do.
to just get better sculptors and better at what they do. It's been fun to, and so then we have to go and challenge them, right? It's like, all right, well, you did this thing and it worked out pretty well, but can you do this thing? And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, come on,
I,
we
I
just did that last one.
I really like the Iceman sculpt, like
Yeah.
the whole base and everything. It's just like, I'll say this: when you're trying to catch up on your backlog, like trying to do like an Iceman, like I can just do him blue and dry brush white, and then he's like 90% done. Oh, it saved
Yep.
me so much
So
time.
good.
So thank you for
Yeah.
that. Yeah, no, I haven't gotten to use him yet though. Hopefully within a week, I'll get another
All
X-Men
right.
game
All
going.
right.
So,
You'll get there. You painted him. Now you have to use him. That's just the rule.
It's the way it goes. And the better the paint job, the higher in the priority they go into getting a list.
Exactly.
Even if it's not thematic. I don't know if
typically the faster they get KO'd too.
Exactly. So, yeah. Iceman's going to charge right into the enemy lines by himself and see how long he. I want to shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about one of the elephants in the room. A game that's near and dear to my heart. Armada and X-Wing to a similar extent, but Armada has gone through. We've had a couple of interesting years, and there was for people watching back in, I want to say 2021. AMG had put out they were trying to be very transparent. They put out a thing, hey, as of right now, there's no new product in development, but then. We've also gotten we've gotten stuff that seems like it was developed, and with the rapid reinforcements and rapid reinforcements 2, it's left a lot of people wondering, like, well, what is the position right now? Because usually that stuff would come out around Adepticon times. That's come and gone. We haven't heard anything, and a lot of people are worried that you guys aren't hearing them. So, is there anything that you can say to those folks regarding Armada and kind of what the focus is right now?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, the first I can absolutely guarantee we hear everyone.
That's good.
We're there. The everyone at the studio highly invested in all the communities. We're on the dev side. We are like insatiable for data, and one of the best ways we can access community data is to be very involved in Lurky and all of the Discords and all of the Facebook groups and all of the discussions, like the Reddit threads. We go everywhere because we're really interested in seeing what the community chatter is, what the feedback is. It's a great way to see things in the wild, and we get to bring that stuff internal, and we get to discuss it and dissect it and figure out like where we're going, what we're doing. So, while we're primarily doing that stuff on the dev side to figure out what we're doing next, rules wise or development wise or balance wise, things like that, we see it all. And our marketing team is also heavily involved in scouring the internet for all of the feedback and discussions and everything. So like we hear and we definitely understand, says so many of us are players, like the frustrations and the kind of like, I want info. I want to know what's happening with my favorite game line. And so it's not through malice or indifference that like we're not making anything known to people. Like I say it all the time, right? No one's twirling their mustache, cackling madly with joy because X, Y, or Z thing happened that has made the players unhappy. It's the exact opposite. It hurts us significantly to watch as things that we do and the things we're passionate about to try to bring joy into people's lives are having the opposite effect for whatever reason that may be. And so the reality is that the second that we can say something and we have information to pass on and, it's all ready to go, we'll be the first to yell it from the mountaintops, no matter what that information may be. And, we're always going to try to uphold our commitment to people that we started in 2021 to be as transparent as possible and to give people enough ideas what's going on, but the reality is that in many cases, we're not the end of the chain. We're the start of the chain. As the studio, we get the joy of being able to communicate and interact with people the most. But we have our partners at LFL. We have our publisher at Asmodee, and so there's a lot of different steps and checks that we have to go through when talking about information, when making decisions, when trying to figure things out. Because there's things beyond just. There's things beyond just like the joy of the game or what could be good to add to the game. There's that whole business side that I know people find really icky. But I love it. It is a reality of the situation,
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks are feeling kind of like mixed signals too. One thing, and I don't know if this is more of a marketing thing, but just like feedback, I'd love to hear maybe a revamp of that 2021 statement, because when it says no product in development and then you see rapid reinforcements 1 and 2, I feel like those were developed, even though I think product being like physical, like a differentiation between that, it can be a little confusing and send mixed signals. So I'd love to someday.
I mean, rapid reinforcements really was just kind of our, it was our internal effort to do whatever we could for the games and the communities, right?
And it's been well received too. Those are great.
Yeah, and it was a kind of a thing that got brought up internally as an idea, and it was like, hey, I think there were some players who were pretty invested in Armada within the studio, and they kind of knew what was going on. And so they're like, what if we did this? Like, is this a thing that we could do? And could we affect this,
Hmm.
with the resources that we have available? And could we push this through with everyone else? And so it was a wonderful, unexpected, miracle, surprise baby. I don't know. Like, I'm not sure
Yeah.
exactly what the right metaphor is, but it was a very exciting thing for us to be able to land on and do. And so we were able to do the first one, and that was received very well. And so then we moved on to the second one, and that one launched a little more shaky, but we got it figured out.
I think it
I
ended in a
think
good
through
spot
the
too, because the
erratas.
game is doing
Yeah.
really well. We're seeing so much growth. It's been pretty
Hmm.
awesome. I mean, we do like these little 2-round tournaments here in Orlando, and
Hmm.
they're short. We do them one every month, and they're kind of like casual play plus, because we play kind
Hmm.
of lightly, but you get 2 rounds. You're going to get 2 games in, and gosh, we're seeing more and more
Yeah.
people. We're running out of tables, and so it's great. And it would be
Yeah.
great to have more product on the shelf someday if the planets align, and that can happen. But
Yeah.
I know
And
I know
so,
we'll be waiting to hear something from you guys when you can.
yeah.
Hopefully
And,
sooner.
like, I'm hopeful that we'll have information out, soon, and that we'll know the direction that we're going,
Mhm.
and what's been approved and what's not to say, and
Mhm.
to inform everybody with.
Sure.
And the second that we can do that, we're there for it. At the end of the day, right, the only thing I can really give the Armada community is like solidarity, and that we hear you. We're as
Mhm.
frustrated, at
Sure.
times as you are, at the fact that there isn't information that we can provide. And and we just want to make sure that the game is as supported as we possibly can support it, and that everything's in line as best it can be to make sure the game's healthy and fun and active, and that more people can have communities like yours with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
um
Do you think
so
along the same lines, like with X-Wing? I know there's a lot of
Mhm.
like there are still some reprints that were announced that haven't come out yet,
Mhm.
and the huge ship points were talked about, and I don't know if I think they're kind of like on hiatus right now, but I don't think they're completely dismissed. But is that in a similar situation, or is there anything you can say to the X-Wing
Yeah, I mean,
community?
basically, right? Like, it's unfortunately, it's a lot of the same stuff, where
Hmm.
there's a lot of considerations with those product lines,
Hmm.
and where we are, in the current environment and economy of the world, and all the logistics and everything that go with them. Um in addition to just everything else, right? And also, with X-Wing specifically, looking at where can we go after its very long and successful history of
Mm.
releases. And the reprints and stuff are great for new players, but do they really, can they
Mm.
incentivize and bring what existing players need? And how do we service a bit of both, while also making sure that we're creating healthy products for the retailer, for Asmodee and everything else. And so there's a number of challenges that I think,
Sure.
we're always on the horizon, but have been there. And a lot of the discussion and internal, stuff has been, how do we make sure? I always talk about this, even on all the Adepticon stuff, right? It's all about value. It's not just value to the players, it's value at every level. It's value to the retailer, it's
Yeah.
value to Asmodee, it's value to
I
us.
see a lot of retailers talk about like the value that they have for their shelf space. They only have
Hmm.
so much shelf space, and new
Yeah.
games are coming out. I want to say there's like 1,000 new games, new board games that come out a week if you're like a tabletop game store, and so you
It's a
have to make a
lot.
lot of tough choices. And I
Yeah.
can see that I
It,
can see reprints kind of falling into a gray area sometimes, depending
yeah.
on your area. Yeah.
It's tough, right? Because
Mhm.
you say, okay, well, like, if I bring in this new product, I can't bring in this other product, and which one's going to bring value to that? Because all
Mhm.
stores have a limited amount of space, and
Yeah.
like you said, shelf space is super valuable, and you want to make sure that you're not just valuing players' commitment and collections, but you're also valuing the retailer's efforts and expense to carry
Yeah.
and support the products.
Sure.
And that it's a difficult line to walk, and it's something that we take very seriously. And then, of course, that goes down the chain or up the chain, however you want to look at it. So, hopefully soon we'll
Sure.
have everything like squared away. We'll be able to present a good picture for the future, and people will know what's coming. But
I know these
until then,
communities are definitely going to be looking forward to
yeah,
it. So awesome.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure there'll be a lot of noise when it happens.
Well, I say awesome. I mean, it's
And
also a
size
bummer
of
because
release.
I think we all kind of wish there was more, there could be more
Mhm.
information, but I mean, I appreciate you saying what you can. All right.
Yeah. I mean,
So we'll
like
shift.
like I said,
Yeah.
first first time I have the opportunity to really like point to the announcements or whatever
Mhm.
information's coming in the plan of the future.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to do that because I
I'd love to
know.
get you on for another interview like that's like, hey, here's the roadmap for
Yeah.
Armada. We're not doing Ministravaganza. We're going straight to Crab. No, I mean,
straight
probably, yeah,
straight to the bridge.
yeah,
Straight to the
exactly,
bridge. That's where it
exactly.
belongs.
So let's talk about something that's talking about shelf space that's doing really well on shelf space. Legion. You
Mhm.
guys have a lot of Legion's doing great right now. Like, look, it's you have a whole new line of models that you're redoing for Legion. All of the soft plastic. Now
Yeah.
this is you guys announced this last year,
Mhm.
but you gave us some more examples. So I have some questions. Like for one, how did you decide, what needs to be done first? How do you prioritize the, stuff to change from soft plastic to hard plastic? And you guys teased General Grievous, which
Mhm.
is a little puzzling because he is already in hard plastic. It's got a lot of people thinking, are they doing a new starter? Is this a new edition? So my question is, why Grievous, and how do you
Sure.
decide the order to do for the hard plastic stuff?
So Grievous is pretty easy, right? Like,
Hmm.
he was the first, him and the B1s,
Hmm.
from that Legion clone core set. I guess in the Droidicas to a lesser extent. But in terms of like order of what was the very first hard plastic stuff that Asmodee itself as a publisher ever
Right.
did, it was those three things.
Hmm.
And so, at the end of the day, right, like the Grievous is really good out of that set. I don't think that there's anything wrong with him. I think that he works, but as we were going through the process and we were updating all these other characters,
Hmm.
it was like, well, yeah, but he's Grievous. He deserves a second. He deserves a glow up, just like they all do,
So he's not
right?
getting this instead of the other stuff. It's just in addition
No,
to.
no, yeah, it's just a thing, right?
Okay.
Like it was one of those things where, as we discussed,
Hmm.
our ultimate goal over the next 2 to 3 years, is to replace all of the soft plastic in the line with hard plastic.
That's
So
a, that's a
anything
that's a
that
big
is,
goal too.
yeah. But I mean, I think we believe that it's right for the line. We believe that it's going to bring in more players. We believe that it's going to create a better, hobby environment and experience, and it's going to it allows us to really up the level of detail and visuals for the game,
And you
in
talk
a
about
way
shelf
that's.
space too. I think this is a great way to get new players the stuff they want, but
Mhm,
also as opposed to something like X-Wing, and I'm sorry to X-Wing guys, but like
mhm.
how many TIE fighters are you going to buy when they're still
Right.
kind of the same? Whereas if I got new stormtroopers, like, oh,
Mhm.
you best believe I already have the max number of stormtroopers I can run, but I'm going to get more.
Well,
I'm going to
yeah, and
get
I mean,
more.
and that's kind of the beautiful thing about when you look at long-standing hobby miniatures games, right?
Mhm.
The idea that you can improve a previous sculpt,
Yeah.
even if it's in the same material, and you can release it again.
Yep.
It not only provides people a compelling reason to get it because like, oh, it looks neater. I like these poses better.
Mhm.
I think maybe it's a brand new material. But the fact of the matter is that as a hobbyist who's invested in the painting and the assembly and stuff like that,
Mhm.
it also gives you this excuse to be like, not only am I getting nicer looking or improved miniatures, I also get the chance to utilize my improved painting skills to make them look better, or to do things that I learned along the way that I didn't know when I started. So you do kind of get to double dip a bit more. You get
Yeah.
to rely on some existing players, not all of them, and whoever chooses to do so is fine. But the products like the resculpts and hard plastic are going to be compelling to both brand new players who need them, and to players who have 6 units of stormtroopers but are like, these new ones are so cool, I got to get at least
Oh,
two,
for sure.
right?
And
i
if you
gotta
do some kind of
gotta
like
mix
Path
in.
of the Worthy for Legion after these come
Mhm.
out too, it's like, hey, I need a set for the diorama too, and maybe I can use
Yeah,
my old stormtroopers to be corpses or something like that, or these
yeah.
helmets, that can be, like there's so much. The sky's the limit when
Mhm.
it comes to getting creative
and,
with a hobby
and
miniatures game. I
and
think.
so it was really just like one of those things where it's like, this is one of our big investments into
Yeah,
the future of Legion. It's and we announced it really early because we wanted people to understand that you know this is a serious thing for us. Like, we've been working very
definitely.
hard on ensuring the future of this game, and we're committed to pushing it forward and taking it into the next 10 years of its life and all of this stuff. And for us, this is not a small thing, and it doesn't come at the expense of all the other things that we have planned, right? Like
Because you're still
the
teasing lots of new stuff, and I want to
yeah.
talk about some of this too, like the Bad Batch, for example, like
Mhm,
a dual game release. They came out for
mhm,
Shatterpoint. They're close. to I don't think they've released yet for Legion.
June, I think it's
Yeah,
June
they're very
or
very
July.
close. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's July. I think it's
yeah.
July right now.
One of those J months.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not January because
I'm,
that one's
I'm just
gone.
hoping you guys send me an early access copy. But so like for me, it might be different if I'm very very lucky. But I know there's only so many of those to go around. So no, yeah. But plug, wink, wink, nod, nod.
I was gonna say you're talking to the wrong guy.
I
You
know.
gotta get
I gotta send
Ann
some
on or
emails
something.
after,
I'm
right?
just like, we send things out.
I
That's
don't
really
know.
cool. I
It's,
wish they sent me stuff.
it's nice. Well, you get to paint stuff on stream. You were just painting.
I
You
do.
were just doing Hera the other day, weren't you? Or was it?
That was Dallas.
That was Dallas.
I did the Mando. I
You
did
did
Mando.
Mando.
and
Yes,
Sean
that's
for
right.
Sean.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, yeah. I do get to sneak in some things early because of that.
That's
and, hang out. It's a blast.
I love that, man. Like you guys have so many really cool models, and I love that you guys doing the newer TV show stuff. So like with Rebels and Bad Batch. So Bad Batch was very different for Legion because it allowed a large number of named characters to all go into a single unit. Was this like difficult to balance because it's like you've got 160 point unit or something like that with all these different heavies and was it hard to balance, and B, what kind of new options do you feel that this opens up? Do you feel this gives you new avenues to do other stuff like the Ghost crew potentially in Legion and stuff like that?
This was definitely one of those, we like to give the engineers a lot of flack for the fact that we challenge them heavily on the sculpting side.
Yeah.
And whenever they do something, we're like, that's really cool. Now that you've done this, you can do this. One of the things that happened when we were discussing, new releases and things like that is, we were looking at options and opportunities for new things. And so I presented the challenge to the devs. I was like, hey, the Bad Batch would be super cool, but you can't just make them generic grunts in a unit. You have to make each of them unique. And I think you can do that. And, my stance was that, at first they were like, oh, I don't think that Legion can do that. And I was like, I think you can do it. And I think
like that attitude.
Yeah, well, it was just like, and I think that Fives and Echo and some of the other, attachments, right? These characters that can attach to things, prove that there's something there, but you have to figure it out, which is the best part, right? I'd be like, I can see the end point, but you have to figure out how to get us there. So
isn't that how Steve Jobs invented like the iPhone? Or the
Probably.
the iPod?
I mean,
he's just like, I want this whole hard drive in this little thing, make it happen. And then
the secret to all, successful like heads or visionaries or whoever, right? Jobs or whatever, is they hire people smarter than themselves, and then they excite them through challenge, and then those smart people figure it out, right? So it was just like, I think you could, I was like, I posed the challenge. I was like, I believe that you can do this, and I want you to try. And if you come back and you're like, we did all these things and it doesn't work, then we'll abandon it. But I was pretty confident just based on my understanding and what we had done thus far and from our like analysis of Legion, that it was possible. And to their credit, right, when I brought up that idea, they were pretty much like, that sounds like it'll be very tricky, but it does seem like something that the rules could support if we're clever with it and we do the stuff.
Yeah.
And so they went at it, and Andrew Dursum, our lead Legion dev, and Pagani, and Michael Plummer sat down and they started working through iterations, and we had a couple of busted, like not functional from the rules standpoint attempts at it. Originally they were all going to have their own unit cards and like their own full cards and things like that.
The Inquisitors sort of gave you, I mean, you've had so many different ways to get, unique units and sort of rules, stretching of the rules. There's a lot of different opportunities to bring extra named characters in. And this is
a little
whole
behind,
approach.
a little spoiler behind the scenes. The Inquisitors were originally supposed to have the similar unit composition as the Bad Batch did.
Oh, interesting.
They were going to be a 2-character unit, right?
But then you couldn't run just one, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So you always had to take them in pairs. We walked away from that because the reality of the situation is canonically, like, they don't always pair together. We always see them on screen pretty much in Rebels together, but they do operate independently. So we kind of we're like, yeah, it's a cool idea, but it doesn't really fit for them. So we'll break them up. And we gave them the rules that kind of allow you to take 2 for 1.
Yeah. I like that because last time I ran them, one
together.
was a lot more successful and the other one got stuck. And if I had to keep them together, it would have just ruined the whole day. So I think you guys made the right call.
But so Bad Batch was one of those things where it was like, we really want to be able to open up possibilities to do this. And I think much like Battle Forces, we talk about Ewoks and how Battle Forces, and mercenaries were the thing that allowed Ewoks to become a thing that we could reasonably do in a way that made sense for the game. Bad Batch do open up opportunities for things like, a real crew of the Ghost Unit or
Hmm.
other kind of groups of characters
Yeah, absolutely.
that are individuals that also you want to be able to function together in a way that doesn't cost you more than 800 points. Because if you
Right.
made all of the, even if you allowed a player to take, 8 operatives
Mhm.
so that they could take all of the ghost members plus some other characters, the reality is that it wouldn't work point wise because they'd either have to be super weak
Mhm.
or you'd have to do something else.
And like you
The
said
Bad
with some
Batch.
other games too, sometimes you're capturing somebody at a point in time.
Mhm.
I'm hypothetical. I'm not trying to confirm or deny anything here, but like the Ghost, look, they're popular, they're cool. Maybe
Mhm.
you look at a version of them that represents them from season one, before Sabine is trained with the dark saber. So she's a little weaker. That makes the whole unit
Yeah.
fit, right? You could do a
I
lot of
mean,
different things with that.
I always kind of use the argument of solo arc versus team arc, right? Like
True.
whenever you stick a team together, whenever your story is about a team, all of the individual characters they're much weaker than they are when they're by themselves.
Yeah.
Because if every character can solve every problem without the rest of the team, you don't have a team story. You have a really weird group of people who don't need to be together. So like
Yeah.
like you think about, when they split them up on the show and it's like it's a show, it's this episode's going to focus on Ezra and Sabine, and they can get out of every
Mhm.
problem thrown at them. Like they might struggle a little bit, but they have all the answers.
Right.
Like, wow, they're really strong. And then the next episode, it's like the whole team has to solve a
Mhm.
problem. If you really think about it, you're like, all of these situations that Ezra and Sabine can't seem to figure out and they need a Kanan or a Hera or a Chopper to do, they did in the last episode. So
Yeah.
there's a bit of that, like
Well, you
we're
also
trying
never
to.
saw Kanan quite as strong as then when he thought Ezra was dead, like in season one.
Right.
Like he's like, "Oh, and then all of a sudden he doesn't have to protect anybody else
Yeah.
anymore, so he can just unload." So
So
it supports that whole
yeah.
idea of,
So it's very
yeah,
much this idea of, what story are you trying to tell? And then
true,
you build the
yeah,
characters around it,
beautiful,
and so I think when you talk about that stuff, right, both are viable options. You can make the super strong character, but you're
yeah,
doing that at the expense of the fact that you're probably not going to get them all together. Or you can do this bigger unit, right? And that was kind of the discussion with the Bad Batch. If we do the Bad Batch, making them all individual didn't really make sense because they're just a family. They're a unit the whole time. That's the
right,
whole show. They never really operate independently unless they're forced to. So having something like, you can take a hunter in Legion, but we never did a crosshair or a tech. It
right,
doesn't fulfill the dream. And I think we've seen a little bit of that with the Sabine thing, right? Like
right,
one
right.
of the constant kind of issues that players bring up a lot, or one of their frustrations, is it's like, well, Sabine is in here, but where's the rest of the Ghost crew? And it's like, you are correct. We
Yeah,
should absolutely see
good
more
answer.
of the
You are
Ghost
correct.
crew, but the problem is that without a way to do it that the game allows for,
Mhm.
we talk about this a lot too. Making characters in Legion is difficult because Legion only allows for so many characters.
And,
If you had 40 different named characters that you could take and all your favorites were there, you still can only take what, 4
right.
maybe, if the
Sometimes
and
there's
then
and we're seeing more and more exceptions, like Grogu being a counterpart. Counterpart is a
yep.
system.
and
There's a lot of little
and
little ways to do it.
so one of the big things we've been exploring, right, and that you're seeing and you're going to see more and more of, I think, as we move forward, is we're trying to solve that conundrum. Like
Mhm.
how do we allow for more characters, more iconic faces from Star Wars without sacrificing the idea that Legion is an army game? The unit,
Right.
right, your generic stormtrooper unit, is the most important part of Legion. Whether you feel that way or not,
Mhm.
that's how army games work, right? The
Right.
army is the character. It's not about, it's not Hero Hammer. It's not supposed to be about one character overriding everything else and everything else is just there to fill out points. That can be a fun game, but that's not how Legion, I think,
Oh,
is really built. That's
some
not
people
where it's
definitely play
successful.
it that way. Have you seen the Yoda
Yeah.
lists out there? It's
Oh
like,
yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
mean, you've got that.
yeah.
You've got,
It definitely
you've
is.
seen some
It is
Vader
a
lists.
thing, but I mean, to your point, it does make sense. I mean, there's a reason that there's like 3 core requirement
Mhm.
as far as building, and frankly, when the units look cool, it makes it awesome. Like the clone troopers look
Right.
awesome, stormtroopers look awesome. I'm not a big fan of the way the rebel troopers look, so I'm kind of really looking forward to how those are resculpted and stuff like that. I feel like they're too close to the rebel commander. Like there's too much like Venn diagram overlapping. So,
Rebels are weird,
yeah,
they're all hodgepodge
they
together.
are.
But one of the cool things about the hard plastic, reset is the fact that hard plastic allows for a lot more customization. So
True.
we
Yeah.
talked about it when we showed off some
You
of the
guys showed a
renders
lot
of
of
the hard
alien
plastic.
heads, a lot of cool stuff like
There's
that.
like, I think I want to say there's like 30 heads
Oh my
in that
gosh.
box for options.
Wow.
We did humans, we did calamari, we did,
There was a joke
what
when
else did we
Cad
have in
Bane
there?
was announced that there was going to be there was going to be a hat
Duros.
pack, or that Lando
Oh
was going to
yeah.
have a cape pack. That
Cape
Lando,
pack, yeah.
yeah, a cape
Lando
pack.
just came with his own cape
I,
pack because he's got 3
I
options
know
in
it would
there.
be really
That
cool
was a
if he had,
Simone Elliott special. She demanded all of the capes.
that was a fun time. It was a good time.
Mhm.
So let me ask you a question about some of your recent stuff that's just come out. The Clone Commandos and the Range Troopers, talking about different
Mhm.
directions. These guys a lot of folks thought they were going to be special forces, but you chose to go with support. So like, what kind of led to that decision?
It kind of comes back to the character issue, right?
Hmm.
Like one of the things that we were really noticing was so many, because of the way that Army construction is kind of cordoned off, right? You have to take core units, you have to take a commander, you get X number of slots other than that,
Hmm.
and then you only have so many points to play with. One of the problems that we were noticing was it was just like the restriction on that was starting to really choke off player opportunities and options.
Sure. Yeah.
So I want to play with scout troopers and death troopers. Well, that's going to be hard to really make an army that way because you only get 3 options of those, right?
Sure.
They're all special forces. What are you going to do with that? And so one of the conversations we'd been having was like, what is a support unit?
Mm.
Does it always have to be a skimmer? There were these certain conceits that I think were, and I can't confirm or
They were
deny
kind of like
this.
light vehicles for a
Yeah,
while, but then sometimes
because
there were turrets, and it was
and
it was
I wasn't
ambiguous.
there for those
Yeah.
conversations, and so I don't know. But
Yeah.
our analysis of it was that the buckets kind of got falsely assumed to mean certain things,
Sure.
whereas instead what we have started to look at them as is how do they function within the overall aggregate of the army, right? Like,
Mm.
what does a support unit mean to the army, not what type of vehicle unit, whatever, what kind of training does this have? So from that standpoint, right, you can do dark troopers as a heavy unit because they are implacable armor with tons of like heavy weapon
And I'm
options,
sure they
and
weigh
just
quite a
throw
bit
lots of
too.
dice, and they weigh quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
They are just literally heavy.
Yeah.
And so kind of once we made that discrimination on the dark troopers, we then said, okay, we can start freeing ourselves from some of these preconceived notions that we
Sure.
don't think are accurate or even make sense necessarily, to like, well, range troopers, they have to be special forces because they're specially trained. It's like,
Yeah.
well, okay, but they could also be support because they can be,
Mhm.
the range troopers as they're designed, they kind of are like a mobile turret, right? They're
Sure.
they're a
Yeah.
they're a bit of a mobile E-web because their whole point is they shoot at range. They're very
Mhm.
long range and they shoot troopers down. They mow troopers down, right? With target
Yes.
one trooper. That's so you have a very similar role. It's just not it's not a
It just
skimmer.
because
It's
they have
not it's not an
have
E-web.
legs, because they're
Yeah,
troopers.
because
It
they're
suddenly,
troopers,
yeah, yeah. That's
because it's a
pretty cool.
unit. But from the general concept of like what does the support class offer to an army,
Mhm.
they're offering very similar things.
Very cool.
And
Yeah.
and so that was kind of like where that, and clone commandos kind of became the same thing, right? Like
Mhm.
if we put clone commandos in special forces, now arc troopers are competing with clone commandos. We don't want that.
Right.
We absolutely want players to have the opportunity to play arc troopers and clone commandos along with their normal clones. In order to do that, then it's like, okay, well, I think we can definitely argue and create a unit that feels like a support option,
Mhm.
within the bounds of what we believe a support option needs to offer to the
Yeah.
army.
Support
And
can do damage. They don't just have to throw out like
yeah,
ammunition packs and stuff
and,
like that.
and so that's kind of become a new guiding philosophy, along with like how do we get more characters in a way
Yeah.
that makes sense for Legion and works within the ecosystem, is how do we look at army construction in a way that offers players more options and opportunities to use the cool things
Mm.
that still make sense within the general scheme of what those different buckets are supposed to offer players.
Awesome.
And so that's another really exciting thing too, because it means like, we can do more interesting and varied things with all of these units that people want without necessarily saying, okay, but you have to take that unit that you want at the expense of this other unit you want.
Okay.
Right. And that's going to happen. It's,
Mhm.
whether it's through points or whether it's
There's always
because
going to be some choices to make, but if
yeah.
you give people
And
more fun options with those choices, I think it's a win for everybody.
And so many of those buckets, like the heavy slot, the support slot, right? They haven't seen a lot of growth. They haven't seen a lot of interesting things over the course, like it because just because. So there's a lot of freedom and space there to play for things that make
And
sense and
sometimes
how we
it's a
can build
price
that
point
out.
issue. Like you got this awesome saber tank, but
Mhm.
like, well, I can afford either one saber tank or I can get like two commanders and a core
Yeah.
or something like that. So if I can fill out my army better this way, maybe somebody can
It
makes that.
comes it comes definitely
Yeah.
comes back to that character problem, like
Yeah.
same thing, right? You only have so many points.
Right.
You can only expend so many points on various things. Even
Mhm.
if you had, you know, all of these things, like at the end of the day, you're still limited by 800
Sure.
points.
So you guys are definitely thinking outside of the box. One of the things you talked about at Adepticon, and I think this is a really interesting point, is with the announcement of ARF troopers having a Jedi attachment, which I think is really exciting to me, and I can't wait to see more on that. But you guys talked about how that was going to be like your first step in a renewed focus on faction identity. Can you talk a little bit about that and elaborate on what that means and how you guys are approaching that?
Sure. So, I mean, like at the end of the, in short terms, what it means is that we're really trying to hone in on what makes each faction play unique,
Okay.
right? Like, what are the things that if you're trying to, I always think of it, when I was a player for various game systems and some new interested like customer or player would show up, like some newbie would show up and they'd be looking at the wall and they would be like, this looks really cool, but I don't even know where to start. My first questions would, you'd introduce them to the system,
Mhm.
right? And you'd be like, this game's about Star Wars Legion is about it's about Star Wars and it's big battles in Star Wars.
Mhm.
It's pretty self-explanatory, but maybe you have to go that far. Maybe they don't know what Star Wars is. I don't know. It's a made-up scenario, kids.
Sure.
Um, but at that point, then they would be like, oh well, I don't know which army I'd pick. I kind of like,
Mm.
I really like General Grievous, but I also really love clone troopers. But Luke Skywalker's he's my bow, he's my Huckleberry, like all the time. But stormtroopers are pretty neat, right? Like, where do I go? What you do at that point is you simply start giving them a breakdown of like how each faction plays. You try to match faction play to personality, right? So,
Do you like
and that's
explosions? Do you like stealth? Do you like
yeah,
heroes?
and
Yeah.
so it becomes like faction identity, right? What are the faction identity traits for these different armies?
Okay.
And for us, right, the Galactic Republic is all about elite troops. It's about they are the best equipped, best trained force. They have the entire backing of the Republic, but they don't, because they're elite. They don't have a lot of them, right? There's not a lot of clones. The clones are few and far between, and that's why their training and equipment has to make up for that. And also their bonds of brotherhood, right? They work tightly together. They've been trained since birth to be a holistic unit, a supreme military force.
Yeah.
So
I
how
feel
does
like the
that
clone
force?
commandos kind of fit into that a little bit too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so how do you take those traits, right? Those universal ideas, and then translate them into unit design? And so that's really what we mean when we start talking about faction identity. It's
Mhm.
dialing in what does a faction do well and what don't they do well,
Sure.
and then you start to get these really interesting player choices and tactical opportunities where it's like, okay, the clones are really hard, they're really tough, and they do everything really well, but the second that you can get rid of one unit,
Mhm.
the Death Star kind of starts to fall apart. The
Sure.
synergies start to break down. And from a design and development standpoint, you say, okay, well, how do we incentivize that? How do we build towards that? How do we have these innate like weaknesses and strengths? And then that allows players to try to figure out how to play around them, how to play into them. You don't
Mhm.
want clones to feel just like droids. You don't want droids to feel just
Yeah.
like Empire. You don't want Empire to feel just like Rebels. Each of those factions needs to have a unique playstyle and identity.
And I feel
And
like the
then with
rebels and
that,
the Empire are the two that are closest because by the
yeah.
time the game had kind of grown, you had the Republic and the droids.
Mhm,
They kind of branched out a little bit, where the droids had these B1 lines, and then the clones were
mhm.
closer together. But like at the core of the game, and what you're all redoing right now, gives you great opportunity to elaborate more with Empire and Rebels too.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it is just like when you start a game in general, right? You don't have the understanding of where the game's going to go, where it's going to be. So we have a really exciting opportunity, I think,
Very cool.
now to start to build into those things and make Empire feel like this oppressive, heavily armored but highly command and control centric force that utilizes suppression to break people under an implacable onslaught of like blaster fire and vehicle like mayhem and all this stuff. But if
So
you
I'm
can take
hearing
out their
AT-AT confirmed for 2025,
maybe,
right?
yeah,
Dude, that
it'll
would,
be the whole table, but it'll be
it'd be
great.
wonderful.
Um,
Again, or just have Dallas dress up as an
there you go,
AT-AT.
on all fours.
There we
I don't think his knees could take that one
We'd
though.
have to. They'd have to come up with something. Maybe a prosthetic.
Get him on
legs.
those stilts like
these
the little
stilts.
giraffes in the
There we go.
Lion King musical.
Oh my gosh, that would be
But yeah,
adorable.
so it's like building in more of that idea of the Empire is this really regimented and indoctrinated force.
Yeah.
But the normal, like, whereas a clone trooper has this personal initiative and they're all kind of heroes. The second that a stormtrooper doesn't have an officer to tell him what to do, the stormtrooper's like, I'm gonna stand here until somebody tells me what to do, because I've seen what happens when I don't do that and I get choked. Right. Like it. And then those other options like going to droids, right? The droids are kind of the undead army of Star Wars, where it's just this, they're all really like low quality troops, but they just overwhelm you with this implacable horde that never seems to stop. They can always replace their numbers. It's this endless grind of things. And they also, they might share elements with the Empire where the AI means that they need direct control and they don't know what to do on their own and all this stuff. But they have these different elements to them. And then Rebels being this kind of like scrappy, they believe in a cause, but they don't have a lot of training, so they're really ready to just run away from a fight if things start going tough.
Sure.
But once they run away, they'll regroup and they'll hit you, and they can't stand up to a concerted engagement, but they can be very difficult to pin down. Those kinds of ideas, and then building those back into the factions, into the unit identities, into these things, so that you wind up with this system where no one has an inherent weakness. Like, it's not rock, paper, scissors, but as a player, you have to be aware of what you're good at and what you're not good at. And then you have to use your player skill and your tactics and your strategies to play around those things.
Okay. So kind of related to faction identity, I've got one last Legion thing. This is the 25th year of the Phantom Menace. A lot of Phantom Menace news has been out there lately. And I got to be honest with you, I know we're not supposed to really like ask for like, I need this. Of course, I'll do it all the time anyway.
Sure.
But my heart is crying out for a Gungan army for Star Wars Legion. I just feel like of all the games that exist, this is the perfect place for it. I know you're not able to confirm or deny anything unless you can, which this would be the perfect grand stage to do so. But can I at least encourage you guys to take a good hard look at the Battle of Naboo? You're talking about support, so I could see like a giant dinosaur shield generator being a support. That would like, what better support than a giant shield? And maybe he doesn't attack, but he shields. Right?
I mean, we get to sculpt a cool dinosaur. You got Kadu cavalry, which are pretty interesting, and their little bomba throwers. And
my goodness!
I
can see people putting LEDs and little marbles to be like for battlefield decorations.
I'll put Gungans next to The problem is that so like some people want Gungans, but some people want Night Sisters riding Rancors on Dathomir.
I want that too.
With Night Sister zombies and like
I watched the Book
Shadow
of Boba
Warriors
Fett finale. There's a lot of things I want in there too. Shadow Collective needs a little more stuff too. They're kind of like a faction too, but there's a lot of that. A lot of wish list items.
That's always the challenge, right? Yeah. It's like if I give you Gungans, then I'm not giving somebody else something that they want. So
but I'm gonna buy a lot
of Gungans. We gotta
make
hard choices.
I'm gonna buy a lot of Gungans. I might make it worth your while.
But at the end of the day, right, the goal is to continue to shepherd these games and treat them well and grow the community so that we can get to Gungans,
Looking
we
forward
can
to
get to Night Sisters, and we can get to Book of Boba Fett stuff.
I want to be able to look at my opponent and be like, and like
there you go, like
lose,
just spray them, just spray them
all over the battlefield.
Spit.
They get ejected. You're not welcome in this store anymore, sir. All right, so
4 points. That's what it would be to spit all over your opponent's army.
It could be a command card. You have to actually say it, and it's in Gungan.
There you go. There you go.
The command cards could actually be really fun for an army like that. All right, so let's talk about Shatterpoint. This is the newest. This is the baby. This is the youngest. It's still its introductory year. This game has has blown up, and you guys are doing my favorite Star Wars show, The Ghost Crew, for Shatterpoint right now. And I know you guys have just started like revealing them. They look awesome. What's it like tackling maybe one of the most universally loved kind of groups of characters from Star Wars? At this point in the first year of this game.
Yeah, I mean, nerve-wracking, I suppose, on some level, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of responsibility there. But it was one of those ones where, we talk a lot about, or we get a lot of questions about, you have Legion, why Shatterpoint?
Oh,
you have Shatterpoint, why Legion, right? But I think the Crew of the Ghost is kind of one of the greatest examples of why. Because we talked about at the end of the day, Legion is about the unit. It's about the army. It's a different scale. It's a different scope. It's not only do they play radically different, but what you're doing in them, what you're engaging in them from your Star Wars experience is radically different, right? It's the same question could be said, well, you have X-Wing, why Armada? They're radically different, they're radically different scopes on a Star Wars galaxy that share things.
And
right?
Armada is like a way better game. Sorry, X-Wing. X-Wing's awesome too. I'm sorry.
Wow.
I'm shameless. I'm shameless.
I need that whole Crabbok like views don't reflect my views kind of disclaimer that pops up on the screen.
There's
so I don't get
definitely
yelled
just
at
me
for this.
taking a cheap
Someone's
shot.
gonna be like, that Mike Shick, he said that Armada is a way better game than X-Wing.
Oh my god!
I'm gonna get blamed.
People will take my stuff
it.
out of context for sure. That has happened way too many times. No, X-Wing is the game that got me into tabletop gaming. I love X-Wing. I also really like Armada, and
so the Crew of the Ghost, it was like one of those things where we could do these characters and we could really dive into who they were in the show and make them unique and make them interesting, and that was both very exciting and also very terrifying because, as you say, they're so beloved. And I mean, more so because our amazing senior graphic designer Ryan Ritter, who did all of the Shatterpoint treatments, and he created all the card templates and everything else, just a phenom when it comes to designing Star Wars stuff.
Oh yeah. They look fantastic. I look at these guys and my jaw just hits the floor every time.
Yeah, and so, but they're his most favorite characters in the world, and so we had a high bar because we had to make sure that Ryan was going to be very happy with them, and internally we want to be very happy with them. But it was a blast, right? It was so fun to be able to just go in there and really get into the weeds, and that's been true of all the characters that we've done for Shatterpoint. Like, just being able to explore these really, again, Star Wars, I think, is really built off of people's, feelings and emotional attachments to this amazing cast of characters, from Luke, Leia, and Han to, Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano and Obi-Wan Kenobi, to Mandalorian and Grogu.
There's room for like all these
stuff.
different eras, and it's cool to see, and it's interesting to see where the future is going to go. I know I love to give you wish list stuff, but like there's so many. I couldn't even give you a wish list for this because it could go anywhere from like the Acolyte to back to the Old Republic, the High Republic, to the sequel trilogy, to some of the comics and beyond. There's I feel like there's no limits to Shatterpoint right now.
Again, it was really one of those things where we knew that doing them in the first year was you kind of looked at all the things that, people were clamoring for somewhat and hadn't seen in a Star Wars game yet, from a character-driven skirmish game, or even just the mass army game from Legion. And he said, okay, it's very difficult to do some of this stuff in this quantity or in this experience, right, in these other games, but we can do it in Shatterpoint. And that's the whole reason Shatterpoint exists. If you want to engage with your favorite characters in a very intimate way, right, a skirmish game is always going to be your best bet over a mass army game. Whereas if you want to engage with Star Wars in a more epic scale, kind of like, grand scale, a big, important, impactful event that is really awe-inspiring and looks, just epic in size and scope, Legion is the place for you. And now we have both, right? And so we've really kind of dialed in on those different things. And I think that's what's partly very exciting about the fact that we get to explore some characters, right, that we talked about. Bad Batch is both in Shatterpoint and in Legion, and how different are those? How do they function differently? And they're a great comparison point to say, okay, well, this is what a skirmish game offers you. A game like Shatterpoint lets you do with these characters versus a game like Legion gets to do with these characters. And they both add value and interest to both games in their own way.
Because you can look at one like here in Shatterpoint, these guys are all the unique hero. I'm playing the hero as opposed to playing the whole unit in Legion. And that can apply to other things too. Speaking, you mentioned favorite characters, Thrawn. I got to talk about Thrawn. He's my favorite Star Wars character. What kind of challenges are there in bringing a character like this to a skirmish game that he's known? I mean, he's been on the ground before, but he is more iconically known for being on the bridge of a Star Destroyer, much like we are here today, versus being on a ground game where there's some challenges in that.
I think, like, thankfully, right, we do see Thrawn kind of doing some kicking ass and taking names in the shows.
Yes.
And
that
in the
helped
novels
too.
and
It would have
like
been
that,
harder
right?
if he hadn't done that.
Yeah, I think your bigger challenge becomes when you have a character like Grand Moff Tarkin, right, who is truly just the ominous guy who stands there and gives orders, but we never really see him do a whole lot or anything,
Right.
in the media in terms of like being a fighter, then it becomes, you're like, okay, well, we're just gonna have to believe that he is kind of a badass at shooting his
Mm.
blaster pistol when he needs to, but he
Sure.
doesn't. So that helped, right? The idea that Thrawn is capable, very capable,
Yes.
marshaling has been shown to do that. It made it easier, but I do think there is that whole, how do you capture, the big thing for us was, how do you capture the strategic genius of Thrawn, the fact that he's always 5 moves ahead of you? How do you let the player who's playing Thrawn feel like he has control of that tactical mastermind?
For sure.
And then on the flip side, right, how do you give the opposing player the feeling that like, oh my gosh, like this guy has it all figured out and I have to deal with it? And how do I surprise, right? How do I work around somebody who knows what I'm going to do before I do it? Kind of
Mm.
idea, because that's the reward. That's the story we all want to tell, right? And Thrawn might be infallible, but at the end of the day, he still loses because he's the bad guy. So if we're playing against him, right? If you're
Wait,
playing
I,
against
I
him,
don't view the throne as a bad guy now,
you,
personally.
sure.
No,
Well, he's
no,
against
I
the
know what you mean.
rebellion. If you
For
if you're
sure.
playing
Yeah.
if you're playing the crew of the Ghost, right? The story says,
Sure.
or at least the moment you want to live out on that side is
Absolutely.
overcoming an insurmountable foe. And if you're on the Empire side, you want to be like, this is how the story would have ended if it wasn't an animated show directed at kids.
Absolutely.
Is that
It's
Thrawn would have obliterated them from space, and that's what he's going to do here.
he certainly has a lot of options, but he
Yeah,
knows he also plays by the rules
he does.
sometimes, and
He's a very honorable. He's a very honorable
he
Imperial,
read the
and
rule book and he said,
yeah,
I've got to take a transport down to the surface for
exactly.
this game of Shatterpoint."
Um,
You guys have
so
a new
that was the
mission.
big thing,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
It was
Yeah.
kind of like finding those ways to make him feel like the tactical mastermind who was
Mhm.
directing everything and always knew what was going to come before it showed up. And then, leaning into the idea that though we don't see it a lot, there's a lot of talk being made about how strong this guy is in terms of his mastery of Chris martial arts and,
Mhm.
his ability to get in there and mix it up.
Yes.
Which those always make the best villains. They're the ones where every time, the guy's been on the bridge masterminding everything
Mhm.
for an entire season, and our heroes who have lightsabers finally show up and they're like, we got you, and then he like punches the crap out of them in a blur and they're like, what? I thought you'd be easy, and he's like, you were wrong, right?
Yeah.
Those are
Yeah.
the moments that make everyone stand up out of their chair and go crazy because they're like, oh my gosh, it's gotten even darker.
So that kind of actually is a segue into, because I want to talk about the new mission pack that you guys have coming out
Mhm.
for Shatterpoint. I'll say this: when I have been playing Shatterpoint, there have been times where I really wanted combat and like defeating an opponent or wounding somebody to matter a little more. When I first
Sure.
talked to you about Shatterpoint many months ago, or I think it was last year, I broached the possibility. Oh, so can I table my opponent? What happens then? And you're like, you're not going to table your opponent. Yeah, and I've come to realize how absolutely accurate you are. And I feel like looking over this new mission pack, it looks like it's going to provide extra incentive to do the combat that I like to do. And
Yeah.
do you feel like that was a direction that you guys wanted to, like, kind of have the trifecta of these different mission packs that kind of reward different play styles? I want to be more
Mhm.
area control. No, I want to be more, lightsaber wacky.
Mhm.
Maybe
Yeah,
that's not the
like
best word for it, but yeah.
no, I think lightsaber wacky is how we describe it in the
Yeah.
office too. We're like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is the beat stick one.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
no, it's very intentional in terms of how we designed the initial set of 3 mission packs to,
Mhm.
like we've talked about a little bit in other places. The core mission set it's pretty straightforward and it's there to help you as a new player understand and build your skills in the game without throwing too much at you because you have to learn a lot of stuff. But it also presents, I think that initial mission pack also presents a really strong case for teams that want to run balance, right? If you want to run an Anakin and an Obi-Wan, typically that first mission pack is a pretty good choice for you because it allows your team composition, assuming that you want to like be, have a mix of defense and offense, of control and damage. It works pretty well for that with how the missions lay out, how the different struggles progress, where the
Mhm.
tokens go, and things like that, which objectives turn on active as you win. The second mission pack is definitely, it's got that kind of like ring of death feel. It's got some different stuff to it, so it incentivizes a bit more of a damage skew, I
Mhm.
think, a little bit in terms of like how it clumps you together and what it asks you to do. And then this third mission pack really it kind of throws a lot of different things at you in terms of how many objectives are on the table and things like that, where they are. And so the idea was really to provide these different, all builds can do well in
Mhm.
all three different ones, but a player who becomes really skilled at handling their mission with their squad, a squad that is built to take advantage of the layouts and the different opportunities that each mission pack offer, they're probably going to see slightly more success.
Sure,
At the end
yeah.
of the day, none of the mission packs are going to mean that everyone dies,
Mhm.
but you are going to wind up in a situation where, you're going to get more of that lightsaber wacky
Yes,
options,
for sure.
um,
Well,
and things like. And so playing to those strengths, right? They can help you in a bad matchup, or they can help you kind of overcome different things. And it's you as a player being intentional and understanding that takes you to that next level,
yeah.
right?
There's been so many times where I like, do I go after and try to kill that unit, or do I just, kind of ignore him and hold the objective?
Hmm.
If I, especially with melee characters, which they don't really have the range, and so I
Hmm.
feel like I like the idea of having more incentive to go after a
Hmm.
unit because it's going to get me that momentum that I need,
Yeah.
that's really cool. So I think this is going to be like, for at least for my playstyle, I think this mission pack is going to be the one that satisfies my tabletop experience. Uh,
Being able to access Anakin's identity basically for a
mm,
force on a specific type
yes,
of unit, like it's pretty strong when it matters, and it's not so strong that it's suppressive, but for
right.
sure it absolutely, like,
Yeah,
and
getting one
that's
extra momentum cube isn't game breaking, but it can add up if you're able
it
to
can
exploit it.
absolutely win you a struggle, though,
Yes,
like
yes,
100% if you can pull it off. And
for
the
sure.
thing
Yeah.
I like about that pack, though, is it does have a bit of a gambly aspect to it, because like you said, you can go for the kill and try to get the extra momentum and spend the force, but you're playing a little bit of a short game to a long game, maybe, and will that work out for you or not? I love it when we're able to offer those kinds of tactical and strategic challenges to players, because I think that's where these games come alive, is like, I'm going to choose to do this because I think it will work out in my favor,
Mhm.
and somebody else would look at the same situation and be like, I'm going to choose to do it this way because I think it works out in my favor, and those two approaches can be wildly different.
Yeah, very much so. I think that's very, very cool. Different approaches is another segue. I love these segues. It goes into this new type of unit pack you have. This bounty hunter
Mhm.
pack is not a squad. It's the first time you guys
Mhm.
have done this for. I'm seeing a lot, like over the course of this interview. I'm seeing a lot of stuff that's thinking outside of the box, doing things differently. This is a different approach to Shatterpoint. Are you going to be able to run like all bounty hunters with a pack, like, if you add this to your list? As I don't know, I haven't even looked at, like, tried to build a list using all of these guys yet, because are they all secondaries
Well,
or
so they're all secondaries in that box.
okay?
And so I think, like, you could, with them, you probably could run an all bounty hunter list, probably,
Yeah, right.
by the time they come out.
Hmm.
So, but the idea behind that was, is like, when we present a squad pack, it's kind of canonically, it has to fit within what we see in Star Wars.
Right.
And that doesn't always work for all these characters that we really love and want to get into the game. And the bounty hunters from Empire Strike Back are definitely fit within that, right? Like making Boba Fett the primary and Dengar the secondary, and then these two other bounty hunters the supporting options.
Poor Zuckus and
It,
Forlon, by the way. Shout out to Zuckus
true,
and
they're
Forlon.
not
Maybe
even
we'll see you
not
someday.
there yet. Maybe.
Yeah.
um but so, it's like, it isn't really, you can do it, but it feels very arbitrary. It
Yeah.
feels very gamey, as opposed to being a natural fit within the world. So one of
Hmm.
our discussions is like, this isn't going to be the only time this happens, right? As we explore these different eras, as we explore these different characters, there's going to be times where you have a strong theme, i.e., bounty hunters that we see on the deck of the Super Star Destroyer
Hmm.
in episode 5, but they're not going to work from a squad pack. And the reality is that the only one that we see after that, is Boba Fett, and he's working with Vader on Cloud City, and like, or we go to Return of the Jedi, and now it's like, okay, we're in Jabba's palace with all these like no namers that we don't really know, but we have Boba Fett and Jabba. So we needed a method by which we could take some of these iconic characters from these different points in the media that we see, that have a strong thematic tie but don't work together,
Sure.
or they don't, they wouldn't necessarily pair up. And so the squad pack idea kind of became this neat alternate option to basically say, hey, here are all these cool bounty hunter characters that we all know and love. Here's how you can get them. Just realize that this isn't plug and play. This is like expansion material for your other squads.
So it's dual
Um,
purpose. You can upgrade your units with them, or you can just
mhm.
get the awesome crew, so you can paint them all up, and then you can have your bounty hunters on. I mean, I know
Yeah,
there's a lot of
yeah.
people that like these, that will buy stuff like this just so they have a mini.
Mhm.
Even if they don't play the game, they'll sometimes pick these up
Yeah.
just to have the miniatures because they're really high quality miniatures.
They're very gorgeous.
Yeah.
So and then by making them all secondaries, it was really fun because we got to really dive into each character and from the thematic standpoint of we're going to hire a bounty hunter, right?
Hmm.
Which bounty hunter do you hire? And this is how their skills diverge, and this is what they
Right.
offer to their clients. And so it became this really cool kind of narrative tie-in too, where you as the player, when you pick up that box, you feel like Darth Vader hiring these guys to go take down somebody and you get to like look through their little portfolios on their stat cards and be like, all right, I think for this job I need Dengar, so Dengar is going to go with this squad over here, and
Yes.
for this one I need a Boba Fett, so I'm going to take Boba Fett over here, right? And that was really fun too. It kind of worked out in a way that was very fun. So I'm hopeful and excited to see a few more of those. I don't think they're going to be common,
Hmm.
because
Sure.
we really value the idea of the fact that as a player, if I go buy a squad pack, it's ready to play out of the box. I don't need to worry about how do I fit this into a squad, what do I do with it. My first experience with it can be balanced, right? Can
Right.
be have been tested to work well within itself, and all I have to do is pair it with a squad that I want to. And then from there I can deconstruct the components and say, okay, I like what this unit did, I don't like how this unit interacted with it, what if I brought in this unit? But it makes that first experience, that first test drive,
Yeah.
um, really nice from a player perspective, I think. And of course it makes it very easy on the retailer because they effectively, as long as they have the box, it's like you have everything you need to play with that box. There's
Right.
no, well, if you have this guy but you don't have that box, and then you need this SKU, and that can, adding complexity again, going back to the retailers and how do we make sure that
Exactly.
they're
Yeah.
equipped and well versed and able to support the communities and have success with the game. Managing that wall space and what they need to know to be able to explain to a player, hey, this is what you need, this is everything you want. Like,
Hmm.
the worst, I've seen it before in games where somebody's come in, they bought something they think is cool, they come back and they're like, well, I can't use this without, I read the rules, this doesn't work without this, do you have
Yes.
this? And the retailer's like, no, that's been out of stock for however long, right?
Well, that's
And the
one of the
person,
things I think is so great about Marvel Crisis Protocol. Like the starter
Mhm.
gave you a full 10 dudes and you can mix and
Yeah,
match them. Shatterpoint did the same thing. You have the whole game in a box. You don't
yeah,
have to have anything else. But
yeah, and
on
that's
top of that, your squad packs, you've learned. I feel like there's been so many lessons learned with this. Like you've got so many models in one box that it's only taking up one spot, and you can get the whole crew.
yeah.
I think you've done a great job with applying like modern practices and lessons learned to the new product, and I can't wait to see what comes next.
Well, I'm glad that people are picking it up because
Yeah.
that does mean a lot. 'Cause sometimes we're like, I think we're being smart, but maybe we're not. But yeah,
Hmm.
it's all built on each other, right? And it's really interesting how, because again, we're not only are we developing these games and doing our best to make sure
Yeah.
that they move forward on a long-term scale, but we're also trying to, adjust and course correct for things in the market and how, player interests or, whatever is changing or what the needs of the retailers are. So we do this really interesting, like it's the 5,000 foot view and the 5 foot view all at once.
Yes.
But it is really exciting to be able to take lessons from some things. The squad pack idea is very much like you point out. It's an evolution on what we were doing for Crisis Protocol, and then the interesting question then becomes, as we look forward to the future and what we're doing with Legion, what lessons can we take from what we've learned with these other products, and how do we make Legion better
Hmm.
because of the things we've learned? How do we take the lessons that we've seen from Legion and apply them to others? So it's
An
all
entire Gungan army box all at once.
entire, yeah,
The
just in one
solution
go.
writes itself. Yeah.
It does, and then the Gungans are out,
Yeah.
and
Oh my
you have to
god.
move on to the next thing.
That's
But your
yeah.
card's already been stamped once Gungans come out, so you can't ask for anything else because that's
Yeah.
the way it works.
It's
There's
beautiful.
not three wishes with this genie; it's one. You only get one.
All right, so in closing, I want to start wrapping things up. I know you guys have, I know you got stuff to do. And but we have a Ministravaganza is just coming up. I believe it's coming up in July. I don't know if the exact
Yep.
dates have been published yet, but Any ideas on what people can expect out of Ministravaganza this year?
Yeah, it is in July. I want to say it's the third week in July, but I
Mhm.
don't know that that's been officially confirmed, but it will be kind of mid-July
Mhm.
for sure. Obviously it won't be over our American Independence Day because that would be crazy. We all want to go shoot fireworks off and eat hot dogs.
Mhm.
Um, and then it'll probably take us a week to recover from all the hot dogs that we ate and the burns we got from shooting off the fireworks. So
Yeah, absolutely.
third week seems like it's reasonable, right?
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, so that's happening in July. We're really excited about it. We're going to be covering a bunch of different things. The official schedule will be out. Um, I would want to say sometime in the start of June. I know that the marketing department's been working on kind of all of the social media announcements and stuff for it. And we're going to cover everything we can talk about.
Okay.
So it'll just kind of come down to, again, where we're sitting on all of the different product lines. Like I know for certain we're going to have content for everything we covered at Adepticon. So we're going to have Marvel Crisis Protocol, Star Wars Legion, and Star Wars Shatterpoint.
Mhm.
I don't know 100% for sure what we'll have or be able to talk about with in terms of X-Wing or Armada.
Mhm.
But if there's stuff that we can do, be assured that we will.
Okay.
Um,
If you guys
but
need, you can patch me in, and I'd be happy to talk about Armada for an hour.
perfect.
Anything. Yeah,
Okay.
just let me know.
Yeah.
Just give me the call. I'll answer.
Cover whatever's there
Whatever. Yeah.
and go through it.
Let's even talk about old stuff. That's fine.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, we can have a little retrospective.
There
maybe.
we go. No, very fun stuff.
But yeah, so I can confirm those three.
Okay, great.
The other two, it's kind of like where everything else is sitting. It'll really just depend on, what information we're able to share, when we can share it, and all of that stuff. But as soon as we can do all of that, and we have a firm.
Are you gonna have anything left to actually talk about since you guys spoiled so much at Adepticon?
Oh yeah,
okay.
yeah. We always have more stuff.
Any
like that's our
chance
secret.
of getting new battle forces for Legion? Because I know that you teased the Geonosian battle force a while back that would come out after.
We did talk about that. I obviously can't spoil anything. I can say that if you are a fan of any of the three games that I've confirmed will be there, you won't want to miss several of the panels because there's some very cool stuff that's going to get announced.
Ooh, okay.
And it's not just going to be new release stuff. It's not just going to be future products. We have some big surprises in store that hopefully will blow the lid off some things. So it's been a very
knock
difficult.
Your socks off?
Man, I hope so.
Okay.
Rock your socks off, more likely.
This is why I tell people to always wash their socks, because you never know when AMG is going to knock your socks off, and you don't want to have dirty
clean
socks.
sock is much easier to knock off too, right?
That's
because
true.
It doesn't have the same abrasion.
It doesn't have sweat on it, and it's getting stuck to your feet. Yeah. I have a new puppy that likes to eat socks.
You're just trying to make it easier to rock somebody's socks off by telling them to clean their socks. I see you. I see what you're doing.
I know. It's how it goes. We love to get our socks knocked off. I love to hope for even better news. I'm hoping that we can get some Armada and X-Wing sooner rather than later. That would definitely knock both socks off. But as a fan of all of these games, I'm definitely excited. Will, I know I kept you over time, and I really appreciate you hanging out and sharing what you could. It's been a really interesting discussion. And gosh, I think I'm going to wrap it up, though. I want to thank everybody for watching. You guys leave some of your questions down here. You can jump into the AMG Discord. Even if you're not getting the news that you're looking for, be polite. These are real people, they're real people, and they can only talk about so much, and they're trying. And that was one of my goals here is like they're hearing you, and that means be nice, so all right.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, like I said at the start, right? We definitely are there. We'll always take constructive criticism and feedback, and it may not look immediately like it's being acted on or anything's happening about it, but you can always be assured that you're being heard and we're discussing it. And again, there's no mustache. I know I have a mustache, but I can't twirl it. It's too short. I trimmed it all down after I could. It gets really cold here, so I find that I grow the beard out really long, and then I have to get rid of it once it gets nice. So I can't mustache twirl anymore. So it's not going to happen. We're on your side. We want to make sure that everyone's as happy as they possibly can be within what we can do for everyone that's involved in all the communities.
All right. Well, I mean, well said, and I'm looking forward to some good stuff. We'll see you guys in late July, and I look forward to talking with you again sometime. And thank you again so much for joining us today.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me, sir.
Absolutely. Thanks to all of you guys watching, and thanks to patrons and everybody else. I will talk to you later. May the force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Always wash your socks, and have a great day.